Life of a pharaoh, power, divinity, and daily life in ancient Egypt. Imagine a world where rulers were gods, where every sunrise was a divine act, and where the heartbeat of an entire civilization pulsed to the will of a single man. To be pharaoh was to stand between heaven and earth, the living embodiment of divine order. The pharaoh was not merely a king. He was the chosen link between mortals and the gods, the guarantor of harmony and the face of eternity itself. For over 3,000 years, Egypt's pharaohs ruled one of the most extraordinary civilizations in history. From the first dynasties that rose along the Nile to the golden age of Ramses the Great, they built monuments that touched the sky and carved their names into eternity. Yet behind the grandeur, the pharaohs were also human. Sons, husbands, fathers, and leaders burdened with immense responsibility. Their daily lives were a blend of ritual, politics, and personal struggle, guided by a single mission: to maintain Ma'at, the divine balance of the universe. The story of the pharaohs begins not in palaces or temples, but in the Nile itself. Egypt owed everything to this river. Its yearly floods turned barren desert into fertile farmland, sustaining a civilization where stability meant survival. From this landscape emerged the belief that order must be preserved at all costs, and the pharaoh was its guardian. The Egyptian word for king was Nesu, but pharaoh, derived from per-a, meaning great house, came to symbolize the royal institution itself. To the people, he was both ruler and god, the living Horus on earth, the son of Ra, destined to ascend among the stars after death. This divine identity was not symbolic. It was a matter of faith. The pharaoh's words were law, his actions sacred, his presence the assurance that the sun would rise again. But how did one become a god on earth? For most pharaohs, divinity began at birth. Royal children were raised in the inner sanctums of the palace, surrounded by luxury and ceremony. From the moment they could walk, they were taught to embody authority, how to sit, how to speak, how to command attention. Tutors instructed them in reading hieroglyphs, geometry, theology, and the complex rituals of Egyptian religion. They learned diplomacy, warfare, and the art of ruling with both grace and firmness. The young heirs' education was not purely academic, it was spiritual. They were taught to see themselves as part of the divine cycle of the gods. The morning sun represented their rise, the evening sun their rest. Statues of Horus, the falcon god of kingship, watched over them as they learned that to rule Egypt was to serve the gods in every act. For example, in the golden age of the New Kingdom, young princes like Thutmose III and Ramses II trained alongside soldiers, commanding small units to learn leadership and courage. Their lives were shaped by the idea of preparation, not just for government, but for eternity. Every act, every word, was a step on the path to becoming divine. When a pharaoh ascended the throne, the transition was marked by elaborate ceremonies that blended politics and religion into a single spectacle. The coronation was not simply a crowning, it was a divine transformation. The new ruler was anointed, robed, and presented before the gods in sacred temples. Priests recited hymns declaring the pharaoh as Horus reborn, destined to maintain Ma'at, the balance of truth, justice, and cosmic order. Crowds gathered in the streets to celebrate the new divine ruler. Offerings were made, incense burned, and musicians played as Egypt welcomed the next living god. The pharaoh took a throne name that connected him to the gods, often containing words like Ra, Amun, or Set. Each name was carefully chosen to reflect divine favor and political strength. For instance, Ramses II took the name Usur Maatre Setepenre, meaning the justice of Ra is powerful, chosen of Ra. It wasn't just a title, it was a statement of cosmic legitimacy. Life in the royal palace was unlike anything else in the ancient world. The pharaoh lived surrounded by layers of ceremony and secrecy. His palace, called the Great House, was both home and government. Courtiers, scribes, and officials filled its halls, each serving a specific function in the complex machinery of rule. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the murmur of constant activity. Petitions, records, offerings, and rituals, all orbiting around the living God at its center. The pharaoh's day began before dawn. As the first light of the sun touched the horizon, priests performed the daily ritual of awakening the god in the temple. Simultaneously, the pharaoh himself prepared to embody Ra's rising power. Servants bathed him in perfumed oils, dressed him in fine linen, and adorned him with jewelry symbolizing divine protection, the ankh for life, the crook and flail for authority. Then came the rituals. Every morning, the pharaoh offered prayers and sacrifices to the gods to renew his divine energy and ensure that Ma'at continued to govern the world. In the great temples of Karnak or Memphis, he stood before massive statues of deities, accompanied by priests chanting hymns. Though the pharaoh did not personally perform every ritual, many were carried out by priests in his name. His presence and will were believed to sustain their power. After the morning rites, the pharaoh turned to matters of state. He met with viziers, the highest officials who acted as the empire's administrators. These men oversaw justice, taxation, construction, and diplomacy, all reporting directly to the throne. Scribes recorded every decree, ensuring that the pharaoh's words became eternal law, inscribed in papyrus and stone. Ruling Egypt was not a passive task. The pharaoh was expected to be a warrior, a judge, and a builder. He led armies into battle, personally commanding chariots and troops. He inspected temples and granaries, mediated disputes, and commissioned monuments to celebrate victories and honor the gods. His every action was political, spiritual, and symbolic. For a ruler like Ramses II, power was a performance of eternity. He built colossal statues of himself across Egypt, each proclaiming his divine strength and benevolence. His temples, like Abu Simbel, were aligned with the sun so that twice a year, sunlight illuminated his statue deep within the sanctuary, proof that even nature obeyed the pharaoh. But beyond the image of invincible divinity, there was also a human side. Pharaohs had families, passions, and fears. They took multiple wives, often to secure alliances or ensure a line of succession. Queens, such as Nefertari, Tiye, and Nefertiti, wielded significant influence, acting as political advisors and spiritual partners. The royal children grew up in luxury, but also under immense pressure, groomed to continue the divine cycle. Inside the palace walls, life was carefully choreographed. Servants and attendants moved silently through grand halls, carrying food, scrolls, and gifts. The pharaoh dined on bread, roasted meats, and fruits, drinking wine from foreign lands. Musicians played harps and flutes, while dancers performed in the glow of oil lamps. Yet even these moments of leisure were wrapped in symbolism. Banquets celebrated abundance as a reflection of divine favor. Despite their wealth, pharaohs lived with constant awareness of their mortality. Death was not an end, but a passage to another world, and preparing for it was a lifelong duty. From the moment a pharaoh took the throne, his tomb began construction, a monument designed to ensure his eternal rebirth. Some, like Tutankhamun, died young and left modest tombs compared to giants like Ramses II or Seti I, whose resting places in the Valley of the Kings were masterpieces of art and faith. The pharaoh's daily life was thus a circle, ruling by day, honoring the gods, leading his people, and preparing for the eternal night when he would join the sun on its voyage through the underworld. From the moment a pharaoh ascended the throne, Egypt became an extension of his body. Every order, every harvest, every temple stone moved at his command. But no ruler could govern such a vast kingdom alone. Behind the golden mask of kingship stood a disciplined machinery of administration, a web of officials, priests, and scribes who turned divine will into daily reality. At the center of this system was the vizier, the pharaoh's right hand. Wise, trusted, and powerful, the vizier oversaw all branches of government: justice, taxation, construction, and agriculture. In a kingdom that stretched 1,000 kilometers along the Nile, his job was monumental. He read petitions from farmers, judged disputes, and ensured that the great balance of ma'at, truth and order, was upheld in every court. The vizier's office was the heartbeat of bureaucracy, where endless scrolls of papyrus recorded the pulse of an empire. Beneath him worked an army of scribes, the intellectual elite of Egypt. With reed pens and ink made from soot, they wrote in precise hieroglyphs and hieratic script. Nothing escaped their records: grain yields, tax receipts, temple inventories, even the number of workers cutting stone for royal tombs. To be a scribe was to hold power through knowledge. In a largely illiterate world, they were the keepers of memory. Religion shaped everything the pharaoh did. He was high priest of every temple, intermediary between the gods and humanity. The Egyptians believed that if the pharaoh failed in his rituals, chaos would threaten the cosmos itself. Each morning, priests cleansed sacred statues, changed their clothes, and offered food as though feeding living beings. The pharaoh's participation, often symbolic, was essential to renew the gods' favor. Temples were not only places of worship, but also banks, schools, and economic centers. The great temple of Amun at Karnak employed thousands of priests, workers, and craftsmen. It owned land, herds, and ships, making it one of the most powerful institutions in the empire. Balancing temple power with royal authority was one of the pharaoh's constant challenges. Too much wealth in the priesthood could overshadow the throne, as happened during the reign of Amenhotep III, whose son Akhenaten would attempt a religious revolution. The pharaoh's divine image was also forged on the battlefield. Egypt's kings were expected to defend their land and expand its borders. War was both practical and symbolic, each victory proof that order triumphed over chaos. Chariots thundered across foreign sands. Archers loosed volleys beneath banners of gold and blue, and the pharaoh himself was depicted smiting enemies in scenes carved on temple walls. Among all warrior kings, Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great, stood supreme. He ruled for 66 years, commanding armies that fought the Hittites at the famous Battle of Kadesh. Though the battle ended in stalemate, Ramses turned it into a masterpiece of propaganda. He filled Egypt with reliefs showing himself as a heroic conqueror, driving his foes before him. The world's first recorded peace treaty, signed afterward, revealed his true genius: not only a warrior, but a diplomat who preferred stability to endless war. Diplomacy was as vital as battle. Egypt's wealth attracted allies and rivals alike, from Nubia to Babylon. Pharaohs maintained a web of correspondence with foreign kings, preserved in clay tablets known as the Amarna letters. These texts reveal a surprisingly human world of politics. Rulers requesting gold statues, negotiating marriages, and complaining about delayed gifts. The pharaoh's prestige depended not only on his armies, but on his generosity. A shipment of lapis lazuli or fine linen could secure peace as effectively as a legion of soldiers. Trade flowed along the Nile like lifeblood. From the south came gold, ebony, and ivory. From the east, incense and exotic animals. From the Mediterranean, copper and wine. The pharaoh controlled this vast economy, ensuring temples were supplied and workers fed. Expeditions ventured deep into Africa and across the Red Sea in search of rare treasures. One of the most famous was led by Queen Hatshepsut, who sent ships to the mysterious land of Punt to bring back myrrh trees, incense, and exotic animals, a voyage recorded in stunning reliefs that still survive today. But even the mightiest pharaoh needed to maintain favor at home. Justice was central to kingship. The pharaoh was the ultimate judge, expected to embody fairness and truth. Court scenes depict him seated beneath the image of the goddess Ma'at, listening to pleas and rendering verdicts. Though everyday cases were handled by local officials, royal justice remained the ideal, unbiased, merciful, and absolute. To the Egyptian mind, good governance was not a political achievement but a cosmic duty. When floods came at the right time, when harvests were plentiful, and when peace reigned, the pharaoh was praised for maintaining Ma'at. When disaster struck, poor harvests, drought, or rebellion, it was seen as a sign that the balance had been disturbed, that the ruler or the people had angered the gods. The pharaoh carried not only the burden of leadership, but the fate of creation itself. Despite this enormous responsibility, the pharaoh's life also contained moments of beauty and leisure. Art, music, and poetry flourished in the royal courts. Sculptors crafted statues from limestone and granite, capturing the serene, timeless expression that symbolized divine perfection. Painters decorated palace walls with scenes of gardens, banquets, and hunting expeditions. The pharaohs adored gardens, carefully planned oases of shade and water in the desert heat. Pools filled with lotus flowers reflected the sky. Date palms swayed above walkways lined with papyrus reeds. Ducks and fish provided both decoration and food. These tranquil retreats symbolized the harmony of Ma'at, a miniature version of the ordered universe ruled by the pharaoh. Royal banquets were spectacular affairs. Musicians played harps and flutes, dancers performed intricate routines, and wine flowed freely from amphorae brought from distant lands. Yet etiquette remained strict. Every gesture, every toast, honored the gods as much as the guests. Eating and drinking were acts of gratitude toward divine abundance, and the pharaoh presided as both host and high priest of joy. The pharaoh's family formed another crucial part of this divine theater. The great royal wife held a status second only to the king himself. Queens like Nefertari and Tiye were educated, influential, and deeply involved in state affairs. Their images often appear beside their husbands in temples, signifying not subservience, but partnership. The queen embodied the goddess Hathor, symbol of love and motherhood, balancing the pharaoh's role as Horus and Ra. The royal children lived in splendor, but also under immense expectation. Sons were trained as soldiers and scholars. Daughters often became priestesses or married into noble families to strengthen alliances. Childhood in the royal household was brief. By adolescence, they were expected to take on ceremonial roles, standing beside their parents in festivals and religious processions. In private moments, rare glimpses preserved in art, we see the pharaoh not as a distant god, but as a man. Reliefs show Ramses II holding hands with his wife Nefertari, calling her the one for whom the sun shines. Tutankhamun's tomb contained scenes of him and his queen hunting together, laughing in the desert. Beneath the layers of ceremony and divinity, the pharaohs loved, feared, and hoped like any human being. Even their flaws were monumental. Ambition, pride, and insecurity often shaped their reigns. Akhenaten, for instance, sought to reshape Egyptian religion entirely, declaring that only the sun disk, Aten, was worthy of worship. He moved the capital to a new city, Amarna, and built open-air temples bathed in sunlight. His radical vision challenged centuries of tradition, and after his death, it was swiftly erased. His name was chiseled out of monuments, his memory cursed. Yet his experiment shows how personal belief could shake an entire civilization. By contrast, Tutankhamun, Akhenaten's young successor, restored the old gods and traditional order. Though his reign was short, his nearly intact tomb would make him immortal in modern times. The treasures buried with him, golden masks, chariots, and jewelry, were not just signs of wealth, but symbols of resurrection, meant to guide him into the afterlife. For Egyptians, the pharaoh's death was not an end, but a transformation. As the ruler aged, thoughts of eternity occupied more of his days. Architects, engineers, and priests worked tirelessly on his tomb, ensuring that it would be ready when the moment came. Whether pyramid or hidden chamber in the Valley of the Kings, the royal tomb was designed as a portal to the next world. Its walls were covered with spells from the Book of the Dead, maps of the underworld, and images of gods guiding the pharaoh toward eternal life. Every offering, every inscription served a single purpose: to help the king rise again with the sun, reborn as Osiris, lord of the afterlife. The pyramid or tomb was not a monument to death, it was a machine of immortality. When the time finally came for a pharaoh to die, the transition was treated not as tragedy, but as transformation. Death was the doorway to eternity, and for the ruler of Egypt, that doorway was prepared long before his final breath. Every pharaoh's tomb was a project of devotion. Years of labor by masons, painters, and priests working in secret valleys or under the shadow of pyramids. The process began the instant the royal physicians declared the end near. Priests of Anubis, the god of mummification, took command of the body. They worked in silence, guided by rituals thousands of years old. The pharaoh's organs were carefully removed. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines placed in canopic jars protected by the sons of Horus. The heart, believed to contain the soul and intelligence, was left inside the body, for it would one day be weighed by the gods. The brain, considered unnecessary for the afterlife, was extracted and discarded. The body was washed with sacred oils, covered in natron salts, and left to dry for 70 days. Each day, priests recited spells to preserve not just flesh, but spirit. When the process was complete, the body was wrapped in layers of fine linen. Amulets, scarabs, ankhs, and eyes of Horus were placed between the bandages to guard the pharaoh on his journey. Finally, the golden death mask was set over the face, transforming the mortal king into a divine being. This was no simple burial. It was a cosmic event. The funeral procession wound through the streets as mourners wailed and incense burned. Soldiers marched, musicians played, and priests carried statues of gods before the sarcophagus. The people lined the roads to bid farewell to their living god. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the procession reached the tomb, the sacred passage between worlds. Inside, the burial chamber gleamed with treasures meant for eternity. Chariots, thrones, weapons, and jewelry filled the rooms, each serving a symbolic purpose. Food, wine, and clothing were placed beside the sarcophagus, so the pharaoh would lack nothing in the next world. The walls told the story of his divine journey, the rising sun, the river of stars, the gods welcoming their son home. When the final rituals were complete, the tomb was sealed. Workers filled the corridors with rubble, hiding the entrance beneath sand and stone. Only the priests knew the secret prayers that bound the tomb against intruders. Yet even the mightiest pharaoh could not escape time. Many tombs were looted, others collapsed or were forgotten. Still, the Egyptians believed that as long as the pharaoh's name was spoken, his soul lived on. Immortality lay in memory. The journey through the afterlife was described in vivid detail in Egyptian texts. The pharaoh's soul, called the Ka, awakened after death and began its voyage through the underworld, the Duat. Guided by spells from the Book of the Dead, the Ka encountered a series of gates guarded by monsters and deities. Each trial tested the ruler's purity and knowledge. He declared before 42 judges that he had not stolen, murdered, or lied, reciting the negative confession to prove his righteousness. Finally came the most crucial moment, the weighing of the heart. The god Anubis placed the pharaoh's heart on one side of a golden scale and the feather of Mayat, symbol of truth, on the other. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the king was judged pure and granted eternal life. If heavier, it was devoured by the monster Ammit, ending his existence forever. To the Egyptians, this ceremony was not myth, but moral law. Even a god-king must answer for his deeds. Those who passed the test entered the field of reeds, a paradise where the Nile flowed endlessly and crops grew tall under eternal sunlight. There, the pharaoh reigned once more, united with the gods, sailing across the heavens with Ra in his solar bark. Each dawn, his spirit rose with the sun to bless the living, ensuring that the cycle of life and death continued without end. Through these beliefs, the Egyptians achieved something extraordinary, a civilization built not on fear of death, but on confidence in eternity. Every pyramid, every tomb, every temple was an act of faith that the world was ordered, purposeful, and everlasting. The pharaoh embodied that faith. In his life, he upheld balance. In his death, he guaranteed renewal. Centuries passed, and the faces of the pharaohs faded into sand. Yet the monuments remained. The Great Pyramid of Khufu still pierces the sky after 4.5 millennia, its stones aligned with the stars. The temples of Luxor and Karnak still echo with inscriptions praising kings who lived and died before history began. Each stone was placed to outlast mortality, to proclaim that the pharaohs were not men, but eternal principles of order. Even in decline, the institution of Pharaoh retained its majesty. As foreign powers, Persians, Greeks, and Romans came to rule Egypt, they adopted the trappings of Pharaoh to legitimize their reigns. They wore the double crown, performed the rituals, and offered sacrifices to the gods of the Nile. The divine kingship of Egypt had become too sacred, too ancient, to abandon. Yet beneath the grandeur, the real legacy of the pharaohs was more than temples and tombs. It was the idea of continuity, the conviction that human life could mirror the cosmic cycle of creation and rebirth. The pharaoh was the axis around which heaven and earth revolved, but the people shared in that divine rhythm. Every farmer planting seeds, every artisan carving a statue, every mother teaching her child a prayer contributed to the same eternal order. The pharaoh's story was, in truth, the story of Egypt itself. His power rose and fell with the river, his fortunes reflected in the harvest, his immortality in the faith of his people. When the Nile flooded, it was said that the tears of Isis nourished the land. When it failed, the pharaoh's prayers were blamed for breaking harmony. Kings came and went, but Ma'at endured, carried forward by the belief that the universe was balanced and benevolent. From the earliest rulers of the Old Kingdom to the last Ptolemaic monarch, Cleopatra VII, the essence of pharaohhood remained unchanged. Each ruler inherited the same divine contract, to keep chaos at bay and preserve the link between gods and mortals. Whether building pyramids or negotiating with Rome, they ruled not for themselves but for the eternal rhythm of Egypt. The artistry surrounding them reflected that eternity. Painters portrayed pharaohs with idealized features, youthful, symmetrical, serene, because divinity never aged. Sculptors carved their bodies in perfect proportions, standing tall with 1 foot forward, eternally stepping into the afterlife. Hieroglyphs accompanying these images told not of individual emotions, but of divine virtues, strength, wisdom, justice, and everlasting life. Yet, in private, even the god-kings faced loneliness. Their position separated them from everyone else. Surrounded by servants and worshippers, they could never truly be themselves. Every gesture, every word carried weight. A mistake could offend the gods. A weakness could invite rebellion. Some pharaohs, like Akhenaten, turned inward, seeking solace in spirituality. Others, like Ramses II, found purpose in creation, building monuments so vast that they left no room for doubt. In both paths, the pursuit was the same: to transcend the limits of mortality. As centuries turned to millennia, the tombs of the pharaohs became the focus of legend. Grave robbers risked curses to plunder their treasures. Travelers from Greece and Rome marveled at the pyramids, unsure how such works were built. When modern explorers rediscovered the Valley of the Kings, the silence of 3,000 years was broken. In 1922, the tomb of Tutankhamun emerged from the sand, its golden glow reigniting the world's fascination with Egypt. The boy king, dead for 33 centuries, had achieved what every pharaoh desired: immortality through memory. The discovery reminded humanity that the pharaohs had succeeded in their ultimate goal. They had conquered time. Their bodies slept beneath stone, but their stories lived on, whispered by wind through the desert, reflected in the gleam of the Nile. Today, the world of the pharaohs feels both impossibly distant and strangely familiar. Their temples lie in ruins, their cities buried beneath sand, yet their presence endures in the imagination of every traveler who gazes upon the pyramids or drifts along the Nile. The pharaohs' dream of eternity was not in vain. They succeeded in leaving behind a civilization that still speaks to us, not through words, but through stone, art, and myth. To understand the pharaohs is to understand how humans once saw the universe, not as chaos, but as a symphony of order and meaning. Every sunrise was proof that divine harmony still reigned. Every harvest affirmed that justice and balance guided the world. The pharaohs stood at the center of it all, the living proof that heaven and earth could be joined through duty and faith. Their achievements were staggering. Under their rule, Egypt built monuments that defy comprehension. The Great Pyramid, aligned with the stars, remains the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. The temples of Karnak and Abu Simbel still radiate power, their colossal statues staring across millennia. These were not mere displays of vanity. They were acts of devotion, physical prayers carved into stone. Each temple was a microcosm of the universe, its walls recounting creation, its corridors guiding the faithful from darkness into light. The pharaohs also fostered one of the most advanced cultures of their age. They supported artists, mathematicians, doctors, and astronomers. Egyptian engineers designed irrigation systems that sustained millions, while physicians practiced surgeries and medicines centuries ahead of their time. The pharaohs' quest for immortality drove innovation, transforming faith into technology, myth into architecture. But beyond the splendor, their legacy holds deeper lessons. The pharaoh's life was a constant balancing act between power and responsibility, divinity and humanity. His greatness depended not only on conquest, but on compassion, not only on wealth, but on wisdom. The Egyptians believed that no one, not even a god-king, escaped the judgment of Ma'at. In the end, every heart would be weighed. That belief, that morality outweighs might, remains one of Egypt's most enduring gifts to civilization. It reminds us that leadership without justice is hollow, and power without purpose is doomed to crumble. The pharaohs ruled vast empires, but their true immortality came not from their thrones nor their armies, but from their pursuit of harmony. They sought to align human life with cosmic order, and in doing so, they built a civilization that outlived them all. Even now, the symbols of their power speak across time. The Ankh, sign of eternal life; the Eye of Horus, emblem of protection; the scarab beetle, symbol of rebirth. These images appear in jewelry, art, and language, reminders of how deeply the pharaohs shaped our collective imagination. Their architecture inspired the columns of Greece, the arches of Rome, and the monuments of modern nations. Their concept of divine kingship influenced monarchies from Persia to France. The echoes of their rule reach into the present day. And yet, for all their grandeur, the pharaohs were as mortal as we are. Their hearts beat with the same hopes and fears. They loved their children. They worried about floods and famine. They sought meaning in ritual and prayer. Behind the crowns and headdresses, they were human beings trying to make sense of existence, to find eternity in a fleeting life. Perhaps that is why we remain so fascinated by them. The pharaohs remind us of our own longing to endure, to create something that will outlast our brief years. They remind us that greatness is not only measured in power, but in legacy, in what we build, protect, and believe. If a pharaoh could look upon our world today, he might recognize his own dreams reflected back: towering cities, vast networks of trade, monuments of glass and steel. We too chase permanence in a changing world. The question the pharaohs leave us is timeless. What will we build that endures? What harmony will we leave behind? Their monuments answer quietly across thousands of years. The limestone blocks, the golden tombs, the painted walls all whisper the same truth. Order, faith, and purpose can outlive empires. To live in balance with the world is to live forever. That, more than any crown or throne, was the essence of being pharaoh. As the sun sets over the Nile and its reflection fades into darkness, the cycle begins anew. The stars emerge, those same constellations that guided ancient builders and priests. Somewhere beneath them, the pharaohs sleep, their names still carved into eternity. The river flows on, just as it did in their time, carrying the memory of a civilization that never truly died. The life of a pharaoh was more than a story of kingship. It was the story of humanity's oldest dream: to bring order from chaos, to bridge earth and heaven, to find meaning in the endless flow of time. Their temples may crumble, but their vision endures, written in stone and starlight. So the next time you see an image of the pyramids rising from the desert, remember, they are not tombs. They are promises, silent, unbroken, eternal. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of ancient Egypt, share your favorite pharaoh or discovery in the comments below. And don't stop here. History is filled with lives as extraordinary as theirs. From the philosophers of Greece to the emperors of Rome, every civilization leaves a trail of stories waiting to be rediscovered. Continue exploring, keep asking questions, and let the past remind you of the greatness humanity can achieve when it believes in something beyond itself.